Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. This is actually my second time here. I like your campus so much, I came back. I'm noticing a significant drop in number of participants, but that's okay. I would very much like to go through some of the content, but I did notice that you have a nice booklet here that has the complete presentation of all of the slides. And if I actually, to be honest, if I try to go through everything in my slides, it will take about an hour or two. I will just provide a bit of context as to why data exchange, why global, why open, why do we care about learning, and why do we accelerate? Why do we want to accelerate research and dissemination? Okay. Just want to put that as a context, and then maybe focus on a little bit of how do we do it without getting too intricate and detailed about it, because embarrassingly, I am actually a information scientist, and I embarrassingly like to build things more than perhaps theorize about things. But I will pay attention to the building part of it and discuss some building aspects of this data exchange. So just my discussant, by the way, will be my close friend who has been promising to give me a very hard time, Dr. Samuel. He has asked to offer him extra time for his reflection. So even that puts some pressure in terms of just shortening my talk today. However, I think many of you are here about AI, human collaboration. I want to point out today that openness and global, more important than ever in human AI collaboration, because there has been, unfortunately, an extreme concentration of, I would say, I hope I don't get into trouble for it, monopolization, near monopolization of power when it comes to AI. And there are only a handful, and it's open secret, you can check using AI. There are only a handful of corporations, not even countries, corporations that hold the key to do generative AI in a serious way. And ironically, the largest one of the largest ones, I would say, ironically, is called OpenAI. There isn't much open about OpenAI. I'm going to tell you that straight out. Okay? What do I mean by that? Well, if you try to find out, for example, how does OpenAI actually organize, structure, utilize data? How does it create the training, the learning algorithm, the way it creates its deep learning? How does that work? There isn't much published. It is a very opaque system. You've heard of the term digital divide? If you were scared about digital divide, or concerned about it at least, I think you should be very concerned about hyper-concentration of power when it comes to generative AI into the hands of just a few corporations, very large corporations. Right? Don't get me wrong, I do believe in competition, I do believe in open market sort of solution. However, the world has, for whatever reason, has given up on, I would say, maybe given up is too strong, has not taken seriously in taking on the challenge of provisioning large-scale, powerful, generative AI for social good. And there has to be a more serious attention given to that. That is why, partly, I have perhaps foolishly selected one of the most difficult domains to demonstrate openness, globalization, provide software, create a learning milieu, an environment, than any other probably, that being the health domain, healthcare domain. It is very difficult to create AI in general, generative AI today, impossible actually, technically impossible, without having access to large amounts of data. The reason OpenAI got so much attention so quickly is they used publicly available data. There is actually a non-profit organization called OpenCrawl that collects systematically all of the publicly available data on the web, and OpenAI uses it. They actually tells you they use that data. That's not the only source of data they use, but that's one of their major sources of data that comes from OpenCrawl. However, we know that in healthcare, you cannot utilize just publicly available data to create trustful and appropriate and usable AI systems in healthcare. If someone comes and says, I'm using large language models that exist on the web for our healthcare, you should really seriously show them the door right away. Okay? That's not the way we can create trustful, reliable healthcare AI systems. I can tell you that because I've spent almost half of my life building those kinds of systems. So what is the challenge? The big challenge lies for us is turns out the largest source of, what's happening there? It's not changing. Okay, do I have to put this in view? Okay, let me just close these. And then go here. Yeah, this one. Okay, should be ready now. Yeah, okay, yeah, coming. Good. All right. Turns out the largest source of data, it's not changing yet. Your systems person is there. I just need to use these arrow keys. Just add not the mouse. Okay. But this is not changing. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to do this off the, yeah. So the largest source of data today comes from healthcare. Digital data. So that's both a blessing and also a challenge, obviously. Blessing in the sense that we have lots of data, but that data is behind most of the time paywall, meaning they are not public data, they're controlled by large healthcare systems. So this is this is the vision, at least behind HDX, is can we create an open resource, and if we were to create one, how would we go about doing that? And we want data, open data for AI, to train AI. We also need systems that when we use AI and use analytics, the data that get produced, post-use data, can also be collected systematically, okay? And we want systems that are consistent, persistent, standardized, governed, and can be maintained in a sustainable way. So let me go to skip over and go to a particular slide that I like, which is this one, and talk through what are the aspects of this, dimensions of this open system that we need. So we need to have ways that researchers and scholars can not just access the data, but know where the data is. That's called findability. We need ways to support not just data access, but ways that software and data can live together, and we can combine the software and data in a way that makes them useful. Obviously, because it's healthcare, we need to make sure that access and use is auditable. Easier said than done. By the way, these kinds of systems where we have access to reliable data to support innovation and research don't exist in large-scale ways, especially in healthcare. So these requirements are ways that we can begin to think through. If we want to create open data systems for supporting AI, what are the underlying foundational requirements would we need? These are the things I propose humbly that we need to think about. And especially universities. When I was in UNC, I was fortunate enough to be part of a research group and a research center called Translational Clinical Sciences Center, which built an environment like that. And it has now become production system. It is now used by university, as the researchers as well as clinicians. This was built in healthcare context, but because healthcare data is so complicated and security is so important, that model can be actually used in any different types of domains. What is often missing, and you can think of GitHub, you can think of Kaggle, there are lots of data sources out there, right? But they are not, and believe me, I have looked, they don't support the key elements that I'm describing here, which means, for example, if you go to Kaggle or GitHub and you say, I need some healthcare data on this topic, most likely you won't find it, first of all, because it's healthcare data. But you will find some healthcare data. But then you say, I want to build some type of an analytic model or an AI model using this data. You will not find the software anywhere because they have not packaged it together. By the way, one of the greatest problems science today face, science especially, is replicability. And one of the principles of good science is when something is published and they claim that this is the result, these are the results from my experiment, these are the tools I have used, another scientist should be able to pick that up and replicate that work. Well, it's become near impossible. By the way, this is an open secret in science. There's been papers written now on the crisis in science that we can't replicate other people's work anymore. And so if we don't have the data and the software together, you cannot replicate. What happens then is you end up writing emails to the scientist or their lab and say, I found your data, thank you for sharing your data, but where is the software that you use for analysis? Oh, we'll get back to you. Oh, the PhD student just graduated, went to another university, and there it gets broken. And NSF, at least in the US, National Science Foundation and National Institutes of Health, they're now making it required that you have to publish the data set as well as software in publicly available repositories? Yes, that is actually regulatory-wise required, but it is not done in a consistent way. So it's very important for, especially for experimental sciences, nowadays, without software and data, most experimental science, I would argue, would not work. To have them in combined repositories in logically organized way. And then the other piece is the community. If you look at science and healthcare, especially, most of the research is done as teams across different groups and labs that are collaborating. So there is a community. They need to collaborate, they need to communicate, they need to share, they need access not just to the publications they are working with, they want the publications and the linked data in the same location. It gets very complicated to collaborate if you don't have all of that organized in a singular repository. No such resources exist today. And my argument is, if you want science to be done in a sound, replicable way, if you want science to be done in an equitable way, we need to get all of these pieces together, right? So, last point I will make is, are there any good examples today, even near good examples, that we can learn from? And this is why I spent, even though I'm not a doctor, I have not been trained as a healthcare person. I was trained as a computer scientist, as an information scientist. I spent the last 15 years, 20 years almost, in this biomedical area, because among all the scientific fields, I can assure you, biomedicine is the most advanced when it comes to supporting data, software, aggregation, at large scale, systematically, and making it openly available. It is the model that other disciplines can learn from. And I'm here spending a lot of time with my colleagues from humanities and social sciences. I would urge them to begin to adopt these models if they want any type of traction in AI and computing in the future. They need to begin to emulate this model, especially. This comes from National Center for Biotechnology Information and CBI. And last time I checked, it's still open. NIH is still open for business, but we cannot be assured of that. It is the largest biomedical, and I say that guardedly, because I am now an American, and we tend to use adjectives in these kinds of ways. We are the best, we are the greatest, we are the largest. But this one is the largest in biomedicine and openly and publicly available, last time I checked. And it is not just a repository. You can see the richness of the repository. It has genomic, proteomics, it has literature, it has all kinds of relevant data, all aggregated on the left-hand side. But you see the services it offers. It allows not just access to data, you can submit your data. You can download data. You can develop tools. You can share. You can learn. There's pedagogical content there. This is an excellent model for us to emulate, to promote next generation compute and AI research, and I will just stop my talk here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Mostafa, for the compelling presentation. To respond this insight, I'd like to invite our discussant, Dr. Sam Oh. Before introducing him, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that this symposium was actually initially proposed by Dr. Oh, and he brought all the speakers today from Seoul. So we really appreciate your invaluable help for this symposium. Yeah, thank you. So Dr. Oh is currently a distinguished professor in global affairs at Samgyungwan University in Seoul, following his retirement from the Department of Library and Information Science at the same university. He specializes in metadata and ontology, and as Dr. Mostafa said earlier in the slide presentation, he is a good, close colleague and friend of Dr. Mostafa. So I'm very much looking forward to their insightful discussion that they will share with us today. Please welcome Dr. Oh.
I am very grateful for our distinguished guest. I really enjoyed 3 talks, plus my beloved friend. Actually, the Javed Mostafa is behind of all the connections, actually. And he read, books by Martin Buchner and Dennis Tenen, and recommended me. They are great scholars. And contact them, so I contact them. So we are here, and I love KNU because she's like my adopted daughter. And before, I really, even though I have a lot to say, but I will skip that, and I will directly go to some questions and for him to consider. I'll give a few questions. You can choose anything you like.
Thank you.
The first one is. You talked about DMP, Data Management Plan of NSF, and I want to know the kind of status of DMP, and I wonder whether they follow it through or actual submission of data and the quality of data, reusability of data, and the quality check, and that's one of my concerns. And you also talked about NCBI, and I'm very interested in kind of how we can build NCBI for humanity data. And because you have such an experience, if you can share your insight how we might build, because we have very distinguished humanity scholars, I think they can appreciate your insight. Those are my 2 questions, and related to other, the kind of 3 other more questions. How does aggregation of health data and software promote advancement of an AI? That's another one. What are the critical barriers to overcome to support development of a data exchange environment? And lastly, how do academic institutions benefit from having an environment like an HDX? Okay, those are 5 questions. Sure. You can choose any one, and you can leave some time for audience. Okay?
All right. Thank you so much, Sam, for those questions. I think I would like to focus on at least, not one, at least a couple of them. It's important, I think, for us to realize, and I think we do, that we need to understand the humanistic and I would say, the ethical dimension of technology and AI, which my colleagues have pointed out in very strong terms as to why the humanities are important, why do we need to be critical and reflective about these types of very powerful infrastructure and tools, and that's what humanities and social science can inform us very strongly, and we do need to take that into account. But I think there are in-between layers from there to actually building these tools and technologies. The in-between layers sometimes are boring, but very important. They have to do with policies, and policies that states, countries, as well as at the institutional level that we create and form. And in the US, the national government, in their primary scientific organization called National Science Foundation, I think it was the National Science Board that originally proposed that research is increasingly dependent on data sets and data management and long-term sustainability of those data sets that scientists use in their projects that are funded by the National Science Foundation have to be maintained. Otherwise, replicability of science become threatened. So NSF proposed the policy that when you submit for grants, you also have to provide a data management plan, and that is now required. Every grant application has to submit that. And that data management plan, however, like many things bureaucratic, has become somewhat of a checkbox like procedural thing. Oh, you submitted, I know you submitted a grant proposal last year. Do you have your data management plan? Can I just borrow it and copy it and just sort of adapt it and submit it, and that will be the checkbox, right? What that policy though requires you to do is to propose where and how long the data will be available, by whom, and actually live up to those policies. And the challenge there is the policy is there, but enforcement isn't there. So it becomes complicated to kind of track. Where it has become really important and I think useful, the policies, the data management policy, I don't know if they exist in Canada, but in Korea, because journals have started to now enforce that policy. Journals that, and conferences as well, that publish your paper require you, following that policy, to point out for the study that you are submitting, the paper you're submitting, which repository have you selected to put the data set as well as software, if you are referencing software, so that it becomes available in case the paper is reviewed positively and published. And I think this is where policy started to have positive impact. So even though NSF may not be enforcing, the journal definitely will be enforcing and will require you to have that data and the software submitted. So these are good practices that are very important for us to adopt, especially knowing, and what's the connection to AI? What's the connection to large-scale compute? Well, if you want to do sophisticated data prediction, modeling, data analysis using AI, you will need data. And not just data that are available on the web about which shop to buy your next shoes from. You need actually good data, curated data that are produced by scientists. And this is why it's important to begin to aggregate data in a good data, research data in a systematic way, and that's where the policies become very important. I think the question about how do we build something like this for humanities, why should we be building something like this for humanities, is a bit more complex one, because we may not need for all aspects of humanities data sets like this, but for certain aspects that are becoming increasingly interesting, especially around digital humanities or computational humanities more broadly, we do need data sets. We know that. But there aren't, I don't see any large-scale efforts to do this in the humanities yet, you know? And there may be different reasons for it, and that we can sort of examine that, but it is important to begin to do this in a more organized way. Some countries are beginning to take humanities and collecting data for humanities seriously. For example, Canada has a project, CRKN project. Canada, I'm happy to say this is the place where I've moved to from US, has a research council dedicated to humanities and social sciences, which unfortunately my adopted country, US, does not. It has a very tiny institution called the NEH, National Endowment for the Humanities, which is near death, which was almost near death before, Now it has almost been closed. Not quite, but almost. Doesn't have enough resources to do anything serious. So I don't know what's the situation in Korea, but I hope there is funding here to mount projects like this for humanities and social sciences. Any questions from the audience, perhaps? If we have time.
Yeah, we have some time. Like, we can take one question from the audience. Please feel free to raise your hand if you have any comment or question to Dr. Mostafa.
It seems to have a question there.
Hello, my name is Lee Ji-hyun. I'm a PhD student in philosophy department. And because I mostly study political philosophy, I have some questions interlinked to your lecture. This lecture reminds me of biopolitics, which is known from Michel Foucault, French philosopher. And its main idea is this: if the government or political authority collects data about specific human behavior, they can optimize human life, enhance their life, but at the same time, they get to tame human lives at the same time. And he tries to balance it out, but overall, he's kind of critical to collecting human data and optimizing, because it's making people another brick in the wall, pretty much. And I think you're opposed to Michel Foucault's idea, opposed to biopolitics, and I'm sure you have some consideration about it. I wonder how you're going to solve it.
Thank you so much. That's a very important question. Of course, this is why I have selected, with some risk, I should say, healthcare and biomedicine as a model domain, because the issue of manipulation, exploitation of data becomes immediately very important in this domain, right? But I'm sure you do know that Google, for example, Google's DeepMind division, which is run by Hasabi, their major project, their major focus is life sciences. I'm not sure if you recall the last two Nobel Prizes in computing for the first time given in computing and computer science. One went to Geoffrey Hinton, the other went to Hasabi and his partner at DeepMind. Why? Because they're building ways to engineer new proteins in computationally scalable way. So would you want a private, very large corporation to have control over your life sciences data, or would you want your government to have control over your life sciences data? These are difficult choices, I know. Maybe you don't want anyone to have control over your data. That could be another way. But then it becomes a question of, do we want to go back to an earlier era of life where we don't have access to advanced healthcare? We can all start studying Rousseau and perhaps pursue, ancient cultures and ancient ways of living. That could be a choice. These are trade-offs. I think we all have to think through these choices. I'm not trying to discard your question in any way, but we have to make choices about who controls, who manages, who do we trust, what do we want as our life trajectory. If we don't have access to advanced ways of scientifically studying today, if you want to do biomedicine today, I challenge you if you can do that without access to large-scale data. There's no way. In fact, I will tell you this may be more provocative. You try to manually read and understand all the scientific advances in a specific domain in biomedicine yourself, in your whole lifetime, you don't have time to become a master of that. The reason is there is scientific evidence that shows research production in biomedicine is so large, so voluminous, humans cannot consume that research anymore manually. So we have choices to make.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mostafa
Thank you.
and Dr. L for the conversation and discussion.